Chapter 11, Ninja Path. The hit sent me skidding across the lawn, my body covered in bruises as I hurried to stand. To pause was to get another merciless hit, and Fugaku wasn't pulling his punches. I barely dodged his axe kick, left ground cracked under the force, and I whimpered. He wouldn't kill me, right? Just beat me to an inch of my life and then stop, right? Inner wasn't so sure. If her instructions to run like the devil was on my tail, was any indication. Fugaku wore his scowl proudly on his face. I was under no disillusion of what he thought of me at that very moment. I was always told sex was an amazing thing. People ruined friendships for it after all. Wouldn't it be even better with your spouse? Fugaku didn't seem to think so. He attacked me the moment I arrived to drop Suzuki off. He said it was training, but I wasn't as naive as Suzuki. The killing intent coming from the guy was suffocating. Suzuki and Mikoto sat on the walkway drinking tea and cheering Fugaku on. I felt betrayed. Wasn't Suzuki meant to cheer me on? Was I not his bride candidate? My in-law fed off Sasuke's cheers and attacked faster and hit harder. It was a mercy he wasn't using jutsus. I leaped over his head and managed a leaf hurricane, which he blocked with his forearm. I pushed off him and put distance between us. This wasn't a good match for us, leaving aside him being an adult and me in a child's body. He was simply too fast and too strong. I was an agile person. I hit hard, yes, but those strikes were for openings and overpowering. Fugaku was a clan leader with years of experience. I'd be worried if he did lose to a child prodigy or not. Can't we just talk about this? I tried, not for the first time. I'm not sure why this training session, my tone said I wasn't buying his crap, is so hard. I'm still trying to figure out how he knew I drugged him. It was a restless night. He managed to make it sound casual. Too much lavender tea, I suspect. His eyes drilled into me. I just need to work off my agitation, and as you are my precious daughter, I figured you'd be the perfect candidate to help. After all, you're such a caring girl. Sarcasm did suit him, I realized, giving him a blank stare as he took a stance. Was that why he was always so serious? Because he knew he wasn't a comedian? He charged and I leaped onto his forearm as he threw a punch, using my smaller size to my advantage. I climbed him like a tree. You would think a night alone with your wife after drinking lavender tea would be plenty distressing enough, I said, getting in his face. He growled at the confirmation even as I knee him in the face. I landed a distance away, resorting to hit and run tactics. Why? I heard him say low, but not angry. For an experiment mostly, but you seemed so stressed lately, I thought you could use a night of de-stressing, I explained. Sorry, I was wrong. I wasn't really, it was a part of my master plan after all. With the lust stimulated by the drug making them thoughtless, I doubt they had a chance to use protection. That was probably why he was so mad. With a rebellion coming, he couldn't afford to worry about another child. I smirked viciously at the thought. You need not worry, I have a plan. The blow to my stomach robbed me of air as I fell to my knees, desperately gasping. I didn't even see him move. Fugaku walked by me, as though he hasn't just rendered me breathless, and not in a good way. My vision had dark spots as I watch him sit down beside his wife and Suzuki rushing towards me. Ninjas didn't like to be manipulated. I suspect that was the reason for his anger. He was forced to sleep with his wife, not knowing why, and hated it. For all he knew, she was an imposter. It's not like the drug left anything in the way of thought process. I would know I had to test it on someone. The results were reducing the subject to a mindless animal in heat. It was cruel almost, but they were married, so it would be fine. My parent never complained, so it should be fine, and he was just stubborn. The Uchiha district was filled with more women and children than I thought. The streets didn't have as much as the academy, but there were 3 too many. I had somehow thought Suzuki was the only child here. After all, how could Itaka be expected to kill children? No such luck, it seems. The area was on the other reign of the village, isolated and out of the way. They are the founding clan, and yet this was how they were treated, sentenced to a life of isolation. The villagers thought they were too proud to live among them. Some who know of their lineage believe them a ticking time bomb. It was all a misunderstanding, starting from the second Hokage's pure hatred of the clan and their kin. The war between the two clans caused far too many deaths. Blood was washed away with more blood. Such was the way of the Sengoku era. Some clans didn't even make it into the time of peace, wiped out, or absorbed into larger clans. The Sarutobi barely made it into a time of peace and great nations. The thought of what could be different always plagued my mind. What if someone had done something different? Would the story be different? Would it be for the better or worst? I already know how the story goes. What will it be like with all my interferences? A ball rolled to me and I returned it with a gentle kick, enough to get it back to the kids, nothing more. They smiled and thanked me, going back to their game. Mutely I saw the adults watching the children, no, not watching them but over them. They were trying to protect them from all harm. A sad smile crept its way onto my face. Here they were trying to protect their young from an outside threat, only to meet their end at the hands of one of their own. I clenched my fist, and a determined glare sharpened my eyes. I was gonna save them. No innocents would die, I would make sure of it. I ran to the Uchiha shrine. It was time for case 2. I spent most of the night going over the seal, and while I figured it out, I still needed time to compose it. For now, I needed to mark those for death row. Reaching the top of the steps left me winded. I staggered over to the porch and leaned against it. I stretched my senses, finding 2 hiding guards. They wouldn't be a problem. I took out the scroll and unrolled it in front of me. The kanji goal was written in bold stocks, the instructions forming circles around it. From a distance, it would impossible to tell what it was for, and the kanji gave nothing away. I just needed to make them dismiss me and my totally not fuinjutsu scroll. I clasped my hand and clapped twice loudly. I closed my eyes and concentrated. May all my goals be achieved, I prayed, clapping my hand one last time and activating the seal. It wasn't visible and the chakra in the air and around the building didn't change. Black ink seeped into the cracks and under the mats of the building. Its function was simple: tag anyone that walked through the door frame and then pass the mat. I knew was an entrance to their underground lair. This way I would know who was attending the meetings and then determine if they can be saved. I was the judge and the jury but not the executioner. I felt proud of that fact. I was trying to help. It's not like I could make the situation they dragged themselves into any worse. I rolled up the scroll and tucked it away. Looking up to the sky, I couldn't hold back the sigh. It's a beautiful day. A gentle breeze passed by and I sighed again. I don't know what I expected from him. His eyes stared down at me as his hair danced in the wind, and his small ponytail was suspiciously absent. I narrowed my gaze at him before smiling pleasantly. It's been a while, brother. Itaka's face twisted into a sour frown. He didn't like me calling him brother. To him, Sasuke was his only brother, though I do enjoy his reactions. Why are you here? He asked, his voice oddly deeper than normal. Puberty? I patted the grass beside me in invitation. Surprisingly he took it, walking over and plopping his legs out before him. He looked tired. Has he not been sleeping? No one comes here so I'm relaxing, I said, sighing in the shade. It wasn't a complete lie, it was peaceful here and there was hardly anyone around. He hummed and relaxed just a bit. What did you do to upset father? The question was so sudden that I jumped. Right, of course he knew about that. He probably came home to Fugaku yelling. I'm honestly not sure. Father is very hard to read and understand. I wasn't even lying. Why was he mad about sleeping with his wife again? Itaka said nothing and we sat in silence for a while. It wasn't uncomfortable but more peaceful, especially with Itaka's chakra, much like Sasuke's. It was soothing. I'm running out of time, my mind reminded me. I really didn't have time to sit with the enemy and enjoy the sun's heat. Oddly enough, I couldn't bring myself to move, or even to care that Itaka was the enemy. I sunk further into the grass, which was surprisingly comfortable. I looked over to see Atake with his eyes closed, his head tilted to the sun. He looked to be at peace. His black hair flowed down his shoulders in a way I've never seen before. Thinking of it, even when Atake died his hair was in a ponytail. He looked so much like a girl with his long eyelashes. His face already had stress lines despite him being so young. You've suffered a terrible fate, haven't you? He killed his family to protect the village and died of an illness instead of an enemy. No shinobi would want to die outside of a battlefield, though Atake was a pacifist, wasn't he? He probably didn't want to live like a genocidal shinobi. I reached for him. He was one of the kindest and most loving people I knew, yet he was suffering because of it. He caught my wrist before I could touch him. Crimson eyes peeked at me through long lashes. "What is it?" he asked in a flat tone. He didn't seem angry or annoyed, just tired. "You seem tired," I said as much. He didn't release my hand as his eyes faded to black. "Have you been sleeping properly?" I knew he wasn't. With the responsibility of a first son, clan heir, and double agent on his shoulders, I was impressed he could stand it all. "I'm fine," he said simply, dropping my hand and dismissing me. "Unlikely." I met his shocked expression as chakra threads tightened their hold on his body. I had been tying around him since I reached out and he didn't notice. He was out of it big time. He struggled to no avail. If it were normal chakra threads he would have been free already. As it stood they were conjured from natural chakra. Itake's glare promised retribution but I ignored it and straddled him, before starting my examination. I checked his temperature, normal. His eyes were bloodshot and his heart rate was high blood pressure, too high. I unsealed my medic kit and opened it to a collection of liquids. I looked for the one labeled cocoa, short for coconut water, which is known for lowering blood pressure. I took it out and looked back at Atake's glaring sharingan. "You caused this on yourself, you know," I stated, pinching his nose and forcing the bottle into his mouth. The stubborn bastard put up the greatest fight despite his situation. Pro ninjas were damn scary. His struggles became sluggish once I began to drain him of chakra. His reserves were already low. Was he fighting? I got the liquid down his throat and he eyed me suspiciously as he licked his lips. I touched his forehead and concentrated chakra flowing over his body and through his system. Aside from being drained, he didn't appear to be too hurt. I sensed something out of place, a dark spot, a corruption. It was decaying the chakra that went near it and grow just a little. A cancer of some kind, one that reacted to chakra. It took me a moment to realize I was sensing Atake's killer. An unusual illness that killed him slowly, but speed up when he used chakra. It was so small, unnoticeable, and likely wouldn't be until much later. Like this, I could easily. "Hey Atake," I spoke, opening my eyes to meet his. "Do you believe in fate?" His eyes narrowed and I could tell he didn't understand. "Do you believe everything has a grand design, a role they must play, following a specific script? Everyone has a purpose. From the moment they are born, fate is pushing them down a certain path, one you think is your own but it really isn't, and is instead someone pulling the strings." I thought of Black Zetsu and his manipulation plot. No one knows their own fate, so if someone knows the plot and all its bad endings, isn't it their duty to change it? After all, why else would they know what they should not? I wasn't sure when, but I had suddenly begun to cry. I wasn't feeling very emotional. It was odd. "If someone knows their own fate," Atake spoke, eyeing me without any emotion. "Then isn't it fate's design that they do? Surely fate has trusted them with the knowledge that they may prepare for what's to come." He paused, frowning. "Or perhaps change fate's design altogether. Who's to say fate was the one responsible for the knowledge in the first place?" I stared at him. If not fate, then who would it be? Who would want to change the future so bad they pull my soul to another dimension? Distant bells jingled in the wind, filling the silence between us. Who would have the power of a god and not want the original ending? When one is graded knowledge of a situation, they can do one of two things, Atake began again. They can use it to their advantage, advancing themselves, or they can ignore it and let nature run its course. His eyes narrowed on me, but perhaps there is a third option. Change the outcome of the situation entirely. Wasn't that what I was already doing? Meddling in fate's design. Befriending Naruto, Neji, and Hinata, even interacting with Sasuke was not planned. No, Sakura was not meant to be a Fuinjutsu master at 6, I was already screwing up the system. What's one more middle finger to the plot? A familiar sensation flowed over my hand as ink crawled to cover it. I was a broken gear in this system and I refused to move this broken work. I rammed my hand into Itachi's chest. He jerked, shocked, and panicked. If he was paying attention he would have noticed there was no blood and my hand literally phased through him. Despite his weak bucking I managed to concentrate long enough to find cancer again. I reached for it and paused a few centimeters away. It wouldn't be good to grab it and it scattered everywhere, so instead I trapped it. A seal appeared on my palm and I touched it. Immediately it reacted, trying to feed on my chakra and grow like a fungus. The seal moved around it and a bit further just in case. Itachi stiffened as everything moved in place. This was gonna hurt. I moved my finger to my lips and whispered the dreaded word that would save his life and cause him great pain. Seal. Cancer, the blood, the chakra, and the flesh it was embedded into, tore out of place and into my palm and into another dimension where time did not exist. Itachi screamed. It was loud and pained and I was sure someone would come to investigate in a second. Quickly I plunged Yang chakra into the missing chunk and it began to regenerate the missing cells, thankfully without cancer. And not a moment too soon, since I was ripped off Itachi and thrown into a hard chest before firm hands closed around me. I had a moment to identify the chakra as that of a roaring tiger, dreadful familiar before panic set in. I began to struggle in their arms to no avail, either they were really strong or I was really weak. My money is on the former. Itachi-kun. A healthy head of silver and the scent of dogs reached my notice. They were in a jonin outfit, currently leaning over Itachi's still shocked and very much tied up body. Are you okay? Talk to me. There was a clash of lightning on a clear day and I instantly knew who it was. Dark eyes glared over their shoulder at me and I blinked in confusion and surprise. What the hell is Kakashi doing here? I had a moment of clarity and looked back to my capturer. Then who's this? Green met narrow black, with the thickest brow I have seen since my rebirth. The power of youth. A disembodied voice yelled and the image of a man walking on his hands flowed through my mind. Might Guy held me hostage and my body was filled with dread. My lips began to tremble and my vision became blurry. I was shocked as my nose began to leak. There were a few times during my second life where I allowed my small body to dictate my actions. This oddly seemed like a justified reason at the moment. I was being held captive by the greatest taijutsu master in the whole shinobi world, and I wanted nothing more than to go home and pretend this was a dream. A sob was my only warning before my ears rang with the wail of a child. My throat vibrated with great force and my face was instantly covered in salt water. My senses spread out searching for someone familiar and strong enough to help me. All I got back was Itachi, my mind still in the terminal as I reached for him. Help me. Big brother, please help. The desperation was thick in my voice. Itachi looked at me with pained eyes. The pain from the instant cell removal must not have worn off. He looked even more tired than he did before, but that was to be expected. It didn't matter in the end, he was my only method of escape. I knew how these things work. They met you, analyzed you, see that there's something wrong with you and insist that they should be your friend. I got enough of this in my workplace. I refused to sit through another youthful story. In the back of my mind, something said that wasn't why he was there and that I had other things to worry about. But for the life of me I couldn't bring myself to care. Guy had me in a bear hug and I needed out. Now. Wait, Kakashi. Itachi protested, reaching for me as the threads fell away. Don't move so much, we don't know what she did to you, Kakashi ordered, trying to hold him in place. Itachi seemed to come to his senses and touched his chest, lifting his shirt revealed nothing but ripped muscles. The seal allowed me to pass through the skin and not damage it. I wanted what was inside, not outside after all. Kakashi looked at his stomach, second-guessing himself as to what he just saw. But I thought, I breathe, and your scream. Brother. I whined while he was busy trying to determine what just happened. I was in the jaws of a tiger. Get me out of here. Kakashi looked back at me as I struggled in Guy's arm. Ho ho. None shall escape the power of youth. Guy laughed, tightening his hold. My eyes bugged and I looked to Ataka, who still hasn't come to rescue me. Father, I'm telling father. I yelled, if you don't get me out of this, I'll tell father you bullied me. I threatened. Thinking about it, Fugaku would probably be proud, as would Mikoto, those two currently hating me. Sasuke, I said instead, it'll tell Sasuke that you were mean to me. Itake would do anything for Sasuke, so he'd definitely save me. Once again something in the back of my mind said I wasn't in danger, but they clearly didn't have their facts straight. Guy without a duct-taped mouth is a danger to my sanity. Itake, Kakashi said, getting his attention, just who is this girl? Itake sighed and leaned back, watching me whine with tired eyes. She's my little brother. Friend, he said after a pause. I don't think she was doing something bad, it just caught me unaware. Kakashi didn't seem convinced. He eyed my seal-covered hand and walked over, taking my hand in his. Was his hand always so big? He inspected the seal with narrowed eyes before looking back to Itake. She took something from inside your body, he stated after a pause. I noticed. Itake deadpanned, hard not to when you can feel it. Sorry, I don't know a way to do it without pain yet, I said, my head hanging in shame. I probably should have warned him. Lesson learned. What did you remove? Kakashi demanded, scary. Cancer. I tilted my head in thought, what did you call that thing anyway? It was using his chakra to grow and kill his cells, so I ripped it out. Sorry. Cancer. Itake touched his chest again, eyes wide, before glaring back at me. What did you do with it? I raised my inked hand, displaying the seal in my palm. I was gonna seal it in a storage scroll and burn it. You know Fuinjutsu. Kakashi sounds suspicious. I nodded and his eye narrowed. You sure this kid is the one you know? He asked Itake, never taking his eyes off me. Yes, she's always been a genius at Fuinjutsu, Itake replied, and I could have sworn he had pride in his voice. Kakashi nodded to Guy and he let me go. Before anyone could have second thoughts, I booked it for Itake. They reacted, of course, reaching for their kunao as I hugged Itake, hiding behind him. I did a quick medical scan of his body and chakra system. The cancer was gone. I hadn't missed any of it, thank the heavens. The shinobis relaxed when Itake didn't protest. Honestly, shinobis these days, no trust. Why are you here, Captain Kakashi? Itake asked as I busied myself with unsealing a scroll. Theoretically, I could keep cancer in my arm sealed away indefinitely, but I'd rather not. That would be just asking for trouble. Oh. I was passing through after a mission, Kakashi explained, and I could only roll my eyes. His senses might be sharp, but there was no way he heard Itake's scream and made it here so fast. Nothing short of teleportation could do that. I see. Itake's eyes became sad. I hope you were successful in your mission. They were speaking in code for mine and Guy's sake. It was oddly pointless, as I knew exactly what they were doing. Kakashi was watching the uchiha. What other reason would he have for being so close to the Uchiha shrine? I pulled open an empty storage scroll and placed my ink arm in the center. Transfer, I whispered, and the ink on my arm slivered down my arm and onto the paper. When I pulled away, my arm was clear and a 9-gate seal was printed on the sheet. It was a bit of overkill, but it prevented chakra from interacting with the seal. That, and I only really knew heavy-duty seals. The one I used to phase through Itake was one from the Reaper Death Seal. Sighing, I rolled up the scroll to find all eyes on me, watching me warily. While I did have the ultimate weapon in my hand, it was unnecessary. I paused, lost in thought, fingers cupping my chin and the other on my hip. I did hold a very powerful weapon that would kill someone the longer they used chakra. It wasn't treatable and not transferable, for all I know, it was merely a one-off mutation. I glanced down at the scroll. I would be able to destroy my enemies without any way of it being traced to me. A coy smile spits on my face thinking of the possibilities. Slowly I tucked it away. I'd have to pull an Orochimaru and experiment. My mission was over. I planted the seal and saved Itaki, one of the most overpowered people in the village. With him not dying, a lot of things that happened originally won't have a chance to. My good mood blossomed on my face as I stood and walked a bit away from them. "Thanks, big brother," I said back to them. "You've helped me to find my ninja way." I looked back, my eyes radiating glee. It would be dreadfully boring if all my loved ones died. Poor choice of words as everyone stiffened, but I pushed on. So it seems only fitting that I would protect my main source of entertainment. Was it me, or did I sound like a villain? I won't let the people I care about die. I spun to face them, the wind picking up. To that end, I declare war on all those who stand in my way. Be it a rogue ninja, a dead man walking, a legendary shinobi, or a god. I'll beat them into submission starting now. I looked into their eyes, daring them to stand against me. I will have my way. Sasuke will keep his innocent smile. Tell those that stand in the way of my happiness. I formed a hand seal, a grin on my face. That their days are numbered and counting down. In an explosion of cheery blossoms, I vanished. They stood shocked at the declaration. It seemed to imply more than it should, like the young Uchiha losing his smile. Such a circumstance could only really be caused if the Uchiha went to war with the village like they planned, and lost. Kakashi gritted his teeth. Did she know? He looked to Itaki. Did he tell her? His gaze landed on the flower petals that lay on the ground and his stomach twisted in knots. Was Itaki covering for her and she wasn't a child at all? No, he saw her once before. His mind flashed to the academy where one child had taken on her peers. She had to be a child because if she wasn't, she was a spy planted in the village. An adult pretending to be a child to get information on the village. Or perhaps a child that has a mission and is sometimes masqueraded as an adult. Lady Hannah had some explaining to do. Itaka didn't know what to think. If someone knows the plot and all its bad endings, isn't it their duty to change it? Her question pounded in his head. Did she know? He was planning to kill his clan should they threaten peace, but no one should know about that. If he killed everyone, then Sasuke would surely be unhappy. How did she know? Did she know at all, or was he just paranoid? She had said she wouldn't let her family die. Was she referring to the Uchiha as well? He gripped his chest, gritting his teeth. She had saved him from something he didn't even know existed. If he had continued on, then surely would have died before long. She had saved him, her family. Big brother. His eyes became misty and he hid them under his band. Shisui had said love was stronger than blood. He choked. Sakura was truly annoying. Guy found himself standing beside his two comrades in the silence that was born from the little girl's exit. He had seen her before, of course. No Jonin had failed to talk about the little kunoichi that had challenged her class and won. He thought she had spunk, but seeing the look of determination in her eyes, she was trying to wield the power of youth. Chapter 12 Changeling. Megami Harano married Kaisashi Harano for 10 years, both civilians of Konoha since birth. Their parents were the same. Sarutobi threw down folders that contained the Harano line since the founding of the village. They weren't a clan, just a family of 3 at the start, and have remained that way since. They didn't stand out except for their unique hair. They weren't overachievers and had no connection to noble clans before. There was Megami's friendship with Lily Yamanaka, but that was from both being mothers. Sakura didn't seem to have much of a relationship with the young Yamanaka Ino. The young child Sakura was the only anomaly. She wasn't like the children her own age. She reminded him of Itaki, a child who had seen too much, but that should be impossible. She was born in a time of peace. Kakashi's report replayed in his mind. She sounded like a shinobi who have seen the worst the world had to offer and wanted desperately to protect her loved ones from the same fate, Kakashi said, kneeling before him, his face worried. She seemed to know more than she should. Her mastery of fuinjutsu is also unusual for a child. A changeling was his first guess. It wouldn't be hard to transform into a child and maintain it for a long time, provided you have that endurance. Cases like these weren't uncommon, and Kakashi also thought this to be the case. The Uzumaki that acted as a stage performer was their primary guess. An adult pretending to be a child can only go so long before they go insane. Releasing the transformation and performing in a pleasure house. Hana Uzumaki, a traveling performer, fuinjutsu, and genjutsu specialist, was the perfect match for what he was looking for. She had to be to changeling's true form, but that raises the question of what was she doing and why? Kakashi reported she had a fondness for Itaka's younger brother, Sasuke, even going so far as to save Itaka for his sake. As much as he hated to admit it, young Sasuke could very well be a weakness of hers, along with Naruto and the Hyuga heir. What did all these children have in common that she would want them all in her inner circle? He had already assigned Itaka to watch her along with the Uchiha, since they seemed to be her main focus. Never before had his old age burdened him so much. He retired for a reason. Years of war have left him withered. Where was Jiraiya when he needed him? If not for the Hokage position, he could at least be able to help with the Uzumaki and her fuinjutsu. His master Lord II was a fuinjutsu master himself. It was only a shame he didn't think to follow in his footsteps. His gaze landed on the photos of the previous Hokages. Blonde hair and blue eyes looked at him warmly. Minato was truly a prodigy, and his marriage to an Uzumaki only reformed that. He mastered fuinjutsu and even invented his own from the second's own jutsu. A thought hit him with the force of a tsunami. He sat up horrified. What if that was the reason she was interested in Naruto and Sasuke? Naruto was the son of the fourth and an Uzumaki. Sasuke was a part of the Uchiha clan. The very clan suspected of releasing the nine-tailed demon. Could she really want to release the nine tails? Why? It made no sense to want to. Naruto would die in the event, and the Uchihas would have the ultimate weapon at their disposal. Surely not. An orange glow overtook his office as the sun set in the distance. The night was fast approaching. He needed to speak with Danzo. Mizuno Uchiha is young and ambitious, a bit of a rebel, but loves his fiancée more than life. I looked at the man in question, head resting on his lover's lap, face in pure bliss. His eyes appeared to be closed, but I could sense his sharingan activated and watching. I marked him in the redeemable category. He seemed to only be fighting to protect his world. Hiko soon to be Uchiha. I closed my scroll of judgment and stood, careful not to fall off the light post. With my Sakura Anbu mask look-alike, from the spring festival, I looked very suspicious. Most dismissed me as a child playing shinobi, others thought me an actual Anbu. I didn't know how to react to the latter. A familiar sensation washed over me and I smiled, pleased. With my judgment done, I could spend some time with him. With a backflip, I cleared the pole and fell towards the nearest roof. I frog hopped from the roof to a wall and finally to the ground, landing in a crouch. Sealing away my mask, I spun on my own version of ecstasy. Sasuke. I leaped into his arms, startling the poor boy. Sakura-chan. He yelped, trying to keep his footing. Where did you come from? I smiled at his wide eyes, so innocent and pure. Where have you been? I imitated a pout. I missed you. He blushed as I had intended and scratched his cheek. He winced and pulled his hand away. Only then did I notice the bruises on his face. What happened? I began to panic before Sasuke poked me in the forehead, Itaka style. I gaped at him. That was an Uchiha exclusive move. I teared up for some reason. Itaka did that to Sasuke to show affection. Sasuke had only used it to shut me up. So then why was I so happy? Missing my dilemma or choosing to ignore it, he explained. I'm training with father. He said, his cheeks flushed. My eyes widened as he spoke. If Fugaku was already training him, it meant I was almost out of time. I smiled despite it all. Sasuke was happy, his smile was infectious. He's teaching me the fireball jutsu, but I'm not good at it yet. This fact seemed to disappoint him, and he lowered his head in shame. We can't all be prodigies, he looked up at me. Itachi has his own path that he walks, one unique to him and one other cannot easily imitate. You are not Itachi, and therefore cannot be expected to do the things he can. I looked up at the orange-toned sky. Dusk was really beautiful. Itachi might not show it, but there are things even he can't do. There is nothing Big Brother can't do. Sasuke disagreed. He was always so defensive when it came to his brother. There are. I pushed on. He has poor time management skills, otherwise he would have time to play with you. Sasuke remained silent. He's not good with girls, thus never pursuing a relationship. He wants what's best for everyone, even at the cost of his own sanity. He's a pacifist not suited for the shinobi world. I took a shaky breath. Even so, he'll keep fighting because he doesn't know how to say no. Sasuke pulled me into a hug as I trembled uncontrollably. Once upon a time, I was like Itachi. Blank blue eyes stared back at me, framed by blonde curly hair. I gripped Sasuke's shirt desperately, his chakra flooded my senses, grounding me. I was no longer that thing, I was here in the arms of my first love, for whom I had declared war on fate itself. Sasuke, Naruto, Hinata, Neji, and Itachi, children born to be warriors, turn into soldiers, without a happy ending. Never. I'll rip the universe apart before I allow anyone I love to suffer. There's a saying, crying yourself to sleep, sobbing into your comforter, be that a person or a comfortable blanket. I looked down at Sasuke as he snored softly, curled up in his bed. My eyes stung from crying so long, and yet he was the one sleeping. I couldn't help but smile, brushing my hand through his hair. He leaned into my hand subconsciously and I felt warmth rush through me, my cheeks heated. A blush, I remained myself, it was an interesting feeling. With a heavy sigh, I crawled out of bed and made my way downstairs where the trio sat around the low kitchen table. Itachi had no doubt informed them of what had transpired at the shrine. This was fine, I needed an excuse to involve them anyway. Rounding the corner, all eyes, blazing red with chakra, was on me. I smiled, even as a shiver ran down my spine. Good evening everyone, I greeted with a pleasant smile. We need to talk. Fugaku's voice was stern and left no room for arguments. Itachi and Mikoto didn't move to argue, so they were not team interrogated. I sighed in defeat, spreading my senses as I moved closer to the wall. There were a few people about, but they were uchihas. I snapped my fingers, placing a sound genjutsu around the house. A memory of a lively dinner played in my head and would be what eavesdroppers heard. I touched the wall, concentrating. An inked kanji spread across the wall and about the room. Sound absorbent, noise cancelling, and effectively making the room soundproof. I strode over casually, not at all in a hurry. What I was gonna tell them would change everything. Absently I wished I had stayed by Sasuke's side. Sitting down across from Fugaku, Mikoto to my left, and Itachi to my right. They were so tense it was making me anxious. I shifted under their intense gaze. Who are you and where is the real Sakura? Fugaku got straight to the point. Surprise overtook me and I blinked. They thought I was an imposter? Why can't I be the real Sakura? I asked because seriously, I was born in this body, you know. I had always thought you were too mature for a child, Fugaku explained. The worried faces of my parents flashed before my eyes. Were they under the impression I was a changeling? Your skills with Fuinjutsu are unusual for someone not of the Uzumaki clan. Your protective nature of Naruto only verifies that you have some connection to them. Mikoto was watching my every move. She was friends with Kushina and had welcomed Naruto with open arms as a result. She knew his lineage and had promised to have the boys be friends. She kept her word to a dead woman. That was one of the reasons I liked her so much. With my involvement with Naruto, it makes sense she would want to verify my identity. So then what have you done with Sakura? Hana Uzumaki. His eyes narrowed and his mangyeko activated. It was the first time I had seen his. I didn't even know of its capabilities. It was probably a bad idea to look into them, but I couldn't look away. I realized my mistake too late. My chakra flow came to a sudden halt. My genjutsu shattered and my seals faded away. Inner screamed at me to look away, but that was impossible. My eyes were filled with awe as thought returned. The ability to cancel chakra with a single glance. No wonder he was a beast on the battlefield. Numbly I registered his shocked eyes and Mikoto's gasp. How was such an OP character never explored? I glanced down at my now bare hands. It was almost odd to see clear skin instead of tattoos. I could feel the seals still there, but they were beyond my reach. This power was truly incredible. What's the meaning of this? I looked up to greet shocked faces. He had stopped my chakra flow, so if I was a transformation I would turn back to my original form. Too bad this was my body. Possession. Mikoto helpfully supplied. I frowned, thinking of the only people I knew who could do that. A snarl graced my lips, making Itaki reach for his sword, which I didn't even see there before. I am who I am, I answered, irritated. It's all for Suzuki, Inner told me in an attempt to cool my temper. I hadn't realized I was having an identity crisis until they started asking questions. Was I Sakura, or was I a parasite in her body? If I was here since the beginning, did that make me the original in this timeline? Or did I devour Sakura's soul and take her body? I groaned. Isn't this what drove Kabuto insane to the point of teaming up with Orochimaru? I was born and raised in Konoha. I was given the name Sakura by my loud and overbearing parents. In fear I would be alone forever, my father brought me to the park to make friends. There I met Naruto and a lasting friendship was born. Soon after, while on a run, I met a Hyuga maid, and from there Hinata Hyuga and Niji Hyuga. As we were of the same age group, it only made sense we would be friends. Then there was the spring festival, and the rest is history. Recapped my life and story of friendship. I was only 8, and my life has been eventful. It started as me refusing to act like a child I was not, to plotting a massacre. We grow up so fast. So then, how do you know about the Uchihas and their plans? Itaki accused. There was only one thing I could say to get them off my back. I saw Shisui's execution. I see. Danzo hummed in thought. After hearing his childhood friend's predicament, he had to fight the grin, wanting to mask his face. He had heard about the young kunoichi that had challenged her class and won. It was the talk of nearly all shinobi. When he met her, she seemed so timid to think that was an act. She surely had a sense of danger. If she was a changeling, she wasn't doing a good job at staying unnoticed, but perhaps her mission was not to remain hidden but get their attention. She has affiliations with 3 noble clans and even the head of the information department's daughter, a Yamanaka. Building unbreakable bonds with powerful people would ensure her safety should her life be threatened. She was a danger to the village. I say we deal with her before she becomes too much of a problem. He advised his old friend. Hiruzen hummed, stroking his beard. He had to have thought the same. Surely he wasn't so naive. The clans will be in an uproar and Naruto will become emotionally unstable if something were to happen to her. He warned. Oh, Danzo hadn't forgotten the walking time bomb she had gotten close to. Going so far as to have both the Uchihas and Hyugas protect him was a clever plan, however. We should make an example of her so the boy will be more careful with whom he befriends. As the Jinchuriki, he must learn to value the village first and friends second. Danzo pushed. The third exhaled smoke, his eyes tired. I had wanted young Naruto to learn to love the village on his own. He said. Danzo knew this was a lie. He had heard the report of his friend had gone out of his way to change the child's worldview. Very well, I'll have her taken in and presented as a traitor to the village. Hiruzen closed his eyes as he ordered her execution. He had always thought the act of public shame before execution unnecessary, but Danzo agreed with the second's ideals. Those that are a danger to the village have no place in it. We should attack now while she's unsuspecting. Caught the criminal unaware and unable to defend themselves. No, they are still in the Uchiha district. To attack one of their own will give them fuel and cause to start a civil war. Hiruzen said in a stern, almost scolding voice. Danzo backed down. He was getting ahead of himself. Patience would be the key. The girl was unaware of his roles, so he could afford to take his time. As you say. He bowed. If that is all, I will get the capture team prepared. He turned and began to walk away. Oh, and Danzo. Hiruzen called, causing him to stop and look back. Put Kakashi on whatever team you're going to make. He is familiar with the target and has the skill needed should things get out of hand. Danzo nodded, seeing this to be true, and began slowly limping away. Things were finally looking up. In the silence that allowed my announcement, I took that time to rebuild the sound barrier and genjutsu. That's... Itake was at a loss for words. He had been there in Shisui's last moments. No doubt the memory still hurt. Seeing his vulnerable face made my heart ache in pity. He was only 14. Why did he have to suffer such a burden? Sasuke and Itake laughing plagued my mind. The image of Sasuke standing before a hill of graves swearing to avenge them came next. I had planned to limit the number of people massacred to only those that were unsalvageable, but thinking about it, wouldn't that make Sasuke more capable of fighting than the child Sasuke was? Itake would kill them, thus rendering my effects useless. I nipped on my bottom lip. I needed a change of plan. Those judged had to die, and there needed to be a spy in the Akatsuki, along with someone strong enough to protect Konoha from ambitious Rouge ninjas. Execution. Fugaku was barely containing his wrath. He committed suicide, did he not? I suppose you could call his plan suicide since it ended in his death, I said bluntly. Suddenly I was pinned, a sword at my throat, and a familiar pair of mangyeko scarlet eyes pierced my soul. Don't you dare talk about him like that. Tears dripped onto my face, and once again I was reminded of how young he was. That was insensitive of me, I admitted. Won't you forgive me? His body trembled as he loomed over me. Oddly, even with a sword to my throat, I didn't feel fear. Itake was grieving and burdened with far too much. I sat up and pulled him in a hug. He allowed it, burying his head in the crook of my neck. Mikoto watched in awe. Far as I could remember, Itake didn't break down, and he certainly didn't seek comfort from anyone. Father, I gained Fugaku's fury from the name, and he narrowed his eyes on me. For the sake of your clan, family, and unborn child, I have a request. I used my trump card. Fugaku looked wide-eyed at Mikoto, who looked away bashfully. He gritted his teeth. He didn't like being cornered. I knew. It hurt me to do this, but it needed to be done. His eyes were blazing red when they met mine again. Won't you teach me a jutsu? Chapter 13, Beginning of the End. The end of the day couldn't come fast enough. I sat impatiently through the lectures, watching the sun, willing it to set faster. They said time moves slower when observed, but they never said it failed to move at all. Naruto and Sasuke had excited grins on their faces the entire day. They at least had some level of patience. Maybe I could learn a thing or two from them. When Iruka-sensei finally said the classes were over, I was 2 seconds away from flying through the window. He told us about shuriken extra classes for anyone interested. I glared at Sasuke, daring him to accept when we already had plans. With a gulp, he averted his eyes. Finally free, I dashed out the window, shutting, "I'll come to collect you." Over my shoulder. Iruka yelled something about the act being unladylike, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I ran at full speed all the way home. There wasn't a moment to lose. "I'm home," I called, running into the common area, barely managing to dislodge my shoes before entering the house. "Welcome home," Mother greeted, kissing me on the forehead before walking behind the kitchen counter. She had become more affectionate after I fell in love with Sasuke and began spending more time in the Uchiha district. I wasn't sure of her motive, but I couldn't say I disliked it. Dum. I sighed and braced myself. In an instant, I was in my father's arms being crushed with affection. Where mother had subtly shown affection so I couldn't determine her motive, father had been more upfront. He wasn't going to be outdone by Fugaku. I didn't understand, and when I asked, he said I would understand one day, and that I was very smart. I was strong, I knew, but I could never overpower the old man no matter how hard I tried. I knew there was a large gap between a prodigy and a jonin, but that didn't explain how he was so strong. I had given up on fighting him after losing miserably. It was an acquired taste, but his cuddling wasn't all that bad either. If nothing else, it was warm. "Papa, did you pick up the package?" I struggled to ask from being suffocated in his chest. "Oh yes, I did," he said, putting me down to collect it from the dining table. I took the time to catch my breath. That man needed to learn his own strength. He came back with 4 boxes. I took them, inspecting the context. Pleased, I closed it. "Thank you, Papa," I said, looking at him expectantly. He bent down to my level and I kissed his cheek. His breath tickled my chin, but I powered through. If he realized I found it ticklish, I dread to think of what he would do. He grinned, pleased with himself. I was surrounded by children. "What are you going to be doing with those anyway?" he asked the damning question. I fidgeted under his curious gaze. My cheeks heated and I refused to look at him. "What's this?" Mother said, lending the counter, watching us amused. "I bet it's for Sasuke, you only ever blush when he's involved." Heat traveled to my neck and I resisted the urge to tug on my collar. "Ha ha ha." Father released a belly-deep laugh and I pout with frustration. Why was I struggling with things like this? I was older than this, for God's sake. Acting my physical age, I crossed my arms and huffed. Mother gushed and father only laughed harder. Forget dying of boredom, I was more likely to die of embarrassment. Trying to preserve my life and dignity, I retreated. "Run away to fight another day. I'm going to get ready," I shouted as an excuse as I ran up the stairs. I could still feel my parents' delighted chakra from my room. I glared at the blushing mess of a girl in the mirror. I patted my cheeks to relieve some of the heat. I still wasn't used to emotion though, as it only came around when Sasuke was involved. I predicted I wouldn't have to worry about it too much. I hope. The sun hung low in the sky when I was dressed and ready to leave home. Scroll packed with all I needed, I tucked it away. It was very convenient to have. It didn't weigh me down like bags would have, and I hold more than any bag ever could. It was also great practice, a win-win on all sides. "Remember to collect me tonight at Sakura Hill," I said, turning to my parents. "I won't be in any condition to walk home tonight, so I'll need you." Oh, they grow up so fast, already going on a date with your boyfriend." Mother faked a tear. "It's not a date," I denied. "If I started thinking of it as a date, I won't be able to think clearly." "Like hell, it's a date," Father proclaimed, and I was a fool to think he was on my side. That Sasuke hasn't come to me to ask for her hand in a relationship. My hope and sanity dwindled and died. "Oh, do you remember when you had to ask my father for my hand in marriage?" Mother said, lost in the memory. She swillied, suddenly wiggling about. "You were so cool." Father nodded, eating the praise like a boss. "Indeed, your father is a frightening man," he said before hugging Mother tight to his chest. "But not even the universe could keep us apart." "Kya!" she screamed like Sasuke's fangirls. I felt oddly uncomfortable, as though this was something I wasn't supposed to be seeing. I wasn't a child, but, at that moment, my instincts were saying to look away, or was that just inner? Nevertheless, I did, and not a moment too soon, as I could hear smooching noises behind me. "Get a room, you two," I said as I bolted through the door. My cheeks were ablaze, debunking my hypophysis. Sasuke wasn't the only one who could get me flustered. Stupid immature parents. I arrived at the Uchiha district undisturbed. The sun was still low in the sky. The streets still had life in them, though it was mostly people retiring for the night. I touched a nearby wall and activated the seal. I had to do the same at the police building before my arrival, though that was on a smaller scale. The Uchiha district wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. I had to use the natural chakra in the air as fuel. I felt my fingers begin to turn to stone, but I didn't stop. I could fix that easily. Ink spread from my fingers and through the district. I concentrated on everyone in the area, willing the seal to attach to those I previously marked. By the time I got all of them, my entire arm was turned to stone. Without moving it, for fear it will break, I healed it. After a few long minutes of trying not to look suspicious trapped in a wall, I made my way to Fugaku's house. My hand felt odd when it turned to stone, numb and stiff. If I wasn't worried about losing a limb, I would experiment more. I knew for a fact I was going to attempt to achieve Sage Mode, but I needed a teacher. Apart from Jiraiya and Orochimaru, I didn't know any other living Sage Masters. Jiraiya wasn't even a master, was he? So I actually only knew one living person. I groaned at the thought of learning Sage Mode under Orochimaru. There would be biting and lots of pain, oh, and let's not forget the possibility of death. Thinking about it then, didn't Sasuke achieve Sage Mode via the curse mark? It was a corrupted form, sure, but it was Sage Mode. I stopped in front of the Uchiha home, spreading my senses. Sasuke and Itachi were inside, the former rushing towards the door. The door flew open and Sasuke came rushing out. "Sakura!" he cried, leaping at me. He didn't make it far before Itachi grabbed him by the collar, pulling him back. "What's your hurry, Sasuke?" he asked, holding Sasuke to his chest. Sasuke struggled, failed to escape, and sulked. "Big brother, let go," he winded, "you're gonna make us late." Itachi smiled softly at him and nuzzled him. "Even though I'm free," Itachi pouted, "don't you want to play with me now?" I couldn't help but smile as I watched them. "Let go of your brother, he's going to be late for his play date." Mikoto stood in the doorway looking out. "It's not date," Sasuke denied. "Damn right, it isn't." Fugaku stood next to his wife. "If I agreed to have your date, Sakura is sure to come by the next day asking for your hand in marriage." "Father!" Sasuke sounded horrified. The scene was reminiscent of my own with my family. Sasuke was as red as a tomato. I smiled and stepped up in the silence that followed. "We should get going," I said, smiling at the boys. "Naruto should be at the Hyuga compound by now waiting." "Right." He agreed and walked over to me when Itachi finally let him go. He turned and waved. "I am off," he declared. "Remember to collect him tonight, Itachi," I said. He nodded. "Have fun, Sasuke, we love you," Mikoto said. "Don't do anything that will embarrass the Uchiha family," Fugaku warned. Sasuke blushed again and grumbled under his breath. "I won't," he said. "Love you." He took my hand and booked it. "Bye, mother, father, big brother." "Farewell, Sasuke," Itachi said as we left. Naruto was waiting with Hinata and Hayashi in front of the Hyuga gate. Naruto brightened like the sun when he saw us approach. "Sakura-chan, Sasuke." He waved. Hinata bowed, mostly to Sasuke than me, and Hayashi merely nodded. It never fails to amuse seeing the three of them together. Naruto had all but been adopted by the Hyuga clan. It was painfully obvious Hinata was in love with him and Naruto with her. It really wasn't worth the hassle of getting them to abandon their childish feelings. I bowed to Hayashi before hugging Hinata and Naruto. They were so cute. "Young Uchiha," Hayashi greeted, and Sasuke gave a small bow. Enough to show respect but not low enough to suggest submission. He had to learn the proper way to do it after Fugaku realized Sasuke was going to be spending time with the Hyugas. The two were both noble clans and Sasuke was the second son of the clan head. "Has Hinata told you of our plans?" I asked Hayashi. He looked at me as he relied on me, his eyes carefully blank. "Yes, I will personally collect her when night falls," he said, his eyes narrowed. "I trust she will be in good health when I arrived." What a doting father. Of course, I grinned, Naruto will take great care of her, don't you worry. His face scrunched up as though he swallowed a lime. His chakra changed as well, lemon popsicle. I suddenly had a craving for something sour now. Naruto hid behind Hinata, sensing the danger. I thought it was a dump to hide your emotions around family. All the nobles I knew hid their true thoughts from outsiders. Hayashi and even Fugaku often did this when we met. While Fugaku has given up on forming a truly strong barrier with me, Hayashi needed more convincing. It was a shame he walked around with such a hard face as had a handsome relaxed face. He'd often look at Hinata and Naruto together with such a face. I had often wondered if he saw his wife and his younger self in the two. He sighed and seemed to age just a bit more from talking to me. He patted Hinata on the head and gave her a gentle push. "I'll leave her in your care," he said. I nodded, knowing full well that wasn't true. I could already sense a Hyuga moving irregularly around us. He had a bodyguard for Hinata, of course. After what happened with the Cloud Village, I would be surprised if he didn't. Taking the chance for what it was, I took her hand and pulled her along. "Let's go before he changes his mind." I slowly began to run with her, the boys not far behind. Hayashi could only sigh as he left his daughter in the hands of a devil, that wasn't even the demon fox. During the spring festival, you'd be hard-pressed to find breathing room, let alone room for another stall. Now, however, the streets were like a ghost town. I looked around at the oddly empty space with a shudder. I only really ever came to this spot during the festival, much like most villagers. It was odd to see the streets so empty. "Wow!" Naruto exclaimed, "This place is so creepy." He laughed as everyone nodded in agreement. "Come on, we're not stopping," I said, all too eager to get going. We walked up the steps with no rush, Naruto distracting us with tales of adventures. I smiled listening to their chatter. It was a peaceful evening. Atop the steps during the spring, the sight of cherry blossoms would be what greet you. Looking at it now, I only saw plain-looking trees, not a hint of pink anywhere. "I sometimes forget that Sakura blossoms have such short lives," Hinata spoke softly. "Father often says Sakuras are much like life, fragile and beautiful. Life is overwhelmingly beautiful but tragically short, that's what he says anyway." Deafening silence followed her little speech. She gasped, seeming to realize her mistake. "I'm sorry," she apologized. "What the hell is Hayashi teaching his children?" I rubbed the back of my neck and groaned. I only then realized my name was a death flag of sorts. If I didn't know the plot and fate's design, I would have sworn I was destined for a beautiful death. What the hell were my parents thinking when they named me? The answer came to me then, I bit back another groan. Those two were hopeless romantics. "Well, questionable parenting assigned," I said, walking off. "We have places to be." They followed without a fuss as we tread through the bushes. There was no real path and I was almost certain there was some level of genjutsu around the area, but it didn't matter. With Hinata's byakugan, Sasuke's heritage, Naruto's enhanced senses, and my genjutsu abilities, we would be fine. With the parting of a few more brambles we arrived at our destination. Naruto and Hinata stood gasping in awe. Cherry blossoms littered the grass, but the tree didn't look to have lost a single petal. A sakura tree that never loses its beauty, it bloomed no matter the season. It was truly beautiful in winter. Sasuke had seen it when we first met, though he didn't know it bloomed all year round. "I guess your old man was wrong," I said casually, looking at Hinata. "There are sakuras that are eternal." She looked at me wide-eyed with awe and I smiled back. Like hell, I was going to die off like a background character. The room was empty but for a bed, a desk, and a mirror. Dull blue eyes looked at me framed by curly blonde hair. I unsealed my scroll and prepared the picnic. "Let's get wasted," I shamelessly encouraged, pulling out the sake. The sun was finally setting in the sky. Despite my best efforts, I was the only one drinking sake that evening. Twilight was truly beautiful, the almost eternal glow of the sakura tree, it was a sight to behold. The others seemed to agree to see as they were in awe at the view. Sake with friends and a view, yet it sounded amazing. If things weren't such a mess, I would have liked to bring the entire family here. Father would have loved it. Fugaku and Hayashi could relax and bond over sake, like they often did when Fugaku had to collect Sasuke from the Hyuga clan. The relationship between the clans had been good, too good perhaps. The council was worried the two dojutsu users would start a coup. It just goes to show if you treat your people right you won't have to worry about assassins at the night. I shook my head dismissing the thought. I was here with my best friends and fiancé if all goes well. Mood set, I unsealed 4 small boxes. A lot of time and resources went into these, though I believe it was justified as they had a long-term use. Ahem, I coughed, getting their attention. With red cheek, not from the sake, I handed them each a box. They looked at it critically, using their shinobi training to try and figure out what was inside. Naruto was the first to lose his patience and ripped open the box. A golden locket fell onto the grass with a thud. He looked down confused before taking it in hand and inspecting it. It was oval in shape and made of gold with a small sapphire gem in the center of a spiral pattern. His eyes widened with awe, and he looked from the locket to me and back again. I smiled at his awestruck eyes. He was really too easy to please. Go on, open it, I encouraged. Sasuke and Hinata stood behind him, curiosity getting the better of them. I already knew what they saw when they gasped. I had to get it done by an outsider to avoid any suspicion. Genjutsu was also necessary to portray what exactly I wanted. It cost me a lot, but it was worth it. A man with blonde hair and narrow blue eyes smiled softly at them. Beside him, a woman with long crimson hair and gray eyes grinned wide and bright. Between them, a little boy with wide blue eyes, blonde hair and a grin that matched the woman. The resemblance was undeniable. Had anyone who knew all the parties seen it, they would come to the same conclusion. It was a mini portrait of Naruto with his family, Minato and Kushina both having a hand on his shoulder. I had them in casual wear, Minato in full blue garb and Kushina in a green dress, Naruto in a plain white shirt with an Uzumaki spiral on the front. As dense as Naruto was, even he could see what I was going for. Uzumakis are known for their red hair, I started. But I didn't think your old man should have it, so I gave it to your mom. You need some level-headedness in your blood, so I gave it to your dad. I smiled smugly. The lie came easy, though he was going to go nuts when he realizes the image was accurate as hell. I made a note to burn that bridge when I came to it. Looking back at him, I found him in tears, snots, sobs, and everything. Those were tears of joy, right? I hadn't messed this up, right? Sakura-chan. He cried, leaping at me. I tried not to react violently and took the brunt of the impact as we fell back. He sobs in my chest, leaving snot all over my blouse. I sighed and brushed his hair softly. I guess he wasn't mad, so those were tears of joy then. Sasuke and Hinata's reaction was less dramatic. Sasuke's locket was onyx with a ruby in the form of a tomo, He was excited to see a picture of his family with an extra member in the form of a baby in his mother's arms. I had made the choice to include it as Mikoto hadn't started to show any signs yet. It would be a waste not to include the child. Hinata's own was amethyst with a pale pearl in the center. Upon opening it, she was pleased to see her mother included in her photo with an older Hanabi. Their mother had died during childbirth, however. In the photo, Hanabi was at least 2. Niji and his father were there too. I couldn't resist. I of course wasn't in the family photos, however, I was in the other photo that occupied the second frame. It was a photo of all 4 of us at the spring festival, cherry blossoms everywhere. I had a hard time picking the perfect scene, so I went with where we all came together. That was the festival. I was pleased with it, and they seemed to be as well, a win-win. My own was a rose quartz, the shape of a cherry blossom caved in the front, an emerald gem in the center. Inside were a picture of my family and one of my friends. I would treasure it, of course, but it served another purpose. Hiding around the frame of the locket were small kanjis, seals. I had hidden several seals inside the lockets. Some were passive, others I'd have to activate myself. As none of them was life-threatening, I didn't allow the guilt to foster. I was doing this for their sake, damn it. I'm gonna become Hokage and protect all of you, Naruto declared. Sasuke called him an idiot and Hinata praised him for having an ambitious goal, but I was confused. Didn't he want the acknowledgement of the village? That was the reason he wanted to become Hokage, wasn't it? I frowned, trying to remember if this was a thing. I must have stayed silent for too long as they all looked at me worried. I blinked at them, tilting my head in question. What is it? I asked when they didn't speak up. What does Sakura-chan think of my goal? Naruto asked, his face guarded as if bracing for impact. I stretched my senses but I didn't find any threat nearby. He looked at me expectantly, so I answered with the obvious question. Didn't you want to become Hokage so that the villagers would acknowledge you? Seeing my reasoning, Hinata and Sasuke looked back to Naruto shocked, and he grinned sheepishly. Yeah, he admitted. But so many people have already acknowledged me. Hinata, Sasuke, their family, and Sakura-chan and her family too. He smiled sadly. You all took me in and welcomed me as part of the family, so. He looked at me with determination then. I don't need acknowledgement from anyone else. I finally have a family, people that are precious to me. My eyes widen with every word. Now I only want to become strong enough to protect them. He all but screamed. Talk no jutsu, everyone that is a decent fan of Naruto knew of it. Naruto uses his charisma to sway people to his side and see his worldview. Many called it a deus ex machina, it was so powerful. It doesn't really work on the enemy set in their ways, but those around them often saw the light. It was overpowered at the best of moments, winning the fight by turning the enemy to your side, yet overpowered. That overpowered technique had just been used on her as well as Sasuke and Hinata. They had already admired Naruto for one reason or another, but to have that OP jutsu used on you. Something wet ran down my cheek as my vision got blurry. A man standing tall with the role of the 7th Hokage stood before me then, a smile on his face, looking like his father every day. I choked. Was this what it felt like to be proud? I was happy for him. He overcame his need to be accepted with friendship. It was cringy as all hell, but it was so beautiful to see. What's it like to have a family? Sometime after befriending Naruto, we sat in the field of my secret base. I had just introduced him to my family, making him curious about what it was like. Tiring, I said, looking to the cloudy sky for strength. They demand your time and insist and give you affection no matter how much you protest. They take care of you and love you no matter how many times you cover your room in ink. No matter if you refuse to wear pink because you're a girl or don't eat their homemade sweets because it's bad for your teeth. They always love you, cuddle you, and protect you from bad dreams. I looked over to see Naruto's eyes wide with awe. But you know you don't have to be related by blood to be a family. He looked at me confused and I elaborated. Family are the people you consider precious to you, so long as you stand by each other and love each other no matter what. They are your family. I patted his head, smiling gently at him. You too. You're precious to me and I want to protect you, so that makes you my family. This life was so different from my last. Here I could actually form a bond with those around me and not pretend to be interested because I was told to. I had things I wanted to protect. I had a family. I hadn't realized how much I longed for that. My body moved on its own, rushing toward Naruto with unmatched speed. I crashed into him and we fell in a heap of limbs. I had my revenge running snots on his shirt as I cried in it. Me too. I sobbed. I want to protect those precious to me too. I looked up into his wide blue eyes. Let's get stronger together. He grinned, nodding before pulling me into a tight embrace. Humph, don't forget about us, Sasuke said smugly. I won't be left behind. Hinata stood then. I want us all to stay together so I won't lose either. Hinata declared, her cheeks steaming red. Sasuke, Hinata. Naruto teared up looking at his best friends. I waved them over weakly. Curious, they approached. and in a swift move I had them all in a group hug. Let's all get strong enough to protect what's precious to us. It was a vow on our friendship, the immortal Sakura as our witness, we would become stronger. I could already see it. Dressed in the jonin jackets, together we stood off against a giant beast with 10 tails. Until I drew my last breath, I would fight to protect their happiness ever after. They arrived to find their children and Naruto fighting sleep on the top steps leading to Sakura Hill. 3 out of 4 were anyway, Sakura wrecking Seiken was likely drunk, and fast asleep. Hayashi had to keep himself from strangling the girl for being so irresponsible. Hinata's shadow had informed him that they were in no danger and that Sakura was the only one that was drinking. That managed to calm the man but did nothing for the years of his life he lost. He picked Hinata's sleepy fame into his arms and losing her warmth she snuggled into him. He smiled down at her lovingly as he had from her birth. Naruto lost the fight once Hinata was safe in his arms. Sakura hadn't been joking when she said Naruto would take care of his daughter. Then again, he never doubted the child. The Uchiha heir appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Hayashi knew better, it was likely the boy was here with them the whole time. Itachi was very protective of his family, which was clear from the day they met. Itachi took Sasuke in his arm and tucked Naruto under the other. No one was coming for him, might as well drop him home. His eyes landed on Sakura asleep without a care in the world. She had been crying if her swollen eyes were any indication. It was unusual seeing the child express emotions. She was either happy, interested, determined, angry, or embarrassed. They doubt she even realized she had such amusing expressions when they were present. The sound of rushing air alerted them to the approaching couples. As shinobis they could without a doubt arrive in silence. It was a sign of trust and or respect that shinobi allow anyone to hear them approach. In a swirl of wind, 2 shinobi stood back to back, in perfect duo formation. At that moment you could see the training they had, their undeniable rank as jonin. Sakura dear, are you all right? The woman held the child to the worry on her face. When Sakura's unsupported head fell back like a dead animal they screamed in horror. And just like that the intense air around them evaporated, like water on a hot day. Hayashi and Itachi sighed, turning to leave with their children. Sometimes they wondered if it was becoming of a parent or just an act the Haranos performed to mislead people. Thinking of it like that, didn't Sakura try and fail to act childish? Thank you for taking care of our daughter, Kaisashi Harano said to the 2 nobles with a low bow. They looked back at the aloof man as his equal confusing wife stood with her daughter in her arms. Itachi was getting a headache just looking at them. Their hair was ridiculous and their attire equally so. The husband was the worst of the 2, his hair was combed in the shape of a cherry blossom, and his attire was far too casual for an active shinobi. It made him underestimate them, and that was worrying in of itself. I can't believe she took a bottle of sake with her, Mabuki Harano grumbled. How did you fail to notice a bottle missing? She scolded her husband. He laughed sheepishly, submitting to his wife's wrath. I was preoccupied, dear, he said in a weak defense. Mabuki gasped in offense. Are you saying this is my fault? She fired back. Why do I feel like I'm intruding on a private conversation? Itachi and Hayashi thought in unison. The 2 nobles made eye contact and silently agreed to excuse themselves. In a quick motion, the 2 leaped away silently so as to not disturb the couple. It was rude, but it would surely be ruder to stay and intrude, surely. How rude they left without a word, Mabuki said looking at the spot the 2 nobles once occupied. You probably scared them away with that scary face of yours, Kaisashi said. Said scary face looked at him, daring him to repeat. All I'm saying is you can be very scary, dear. You need to work on your complimenting skills, she said walking down the steps. Sakura is socially awkward as it is, we don't need your stupidity rubbing off on her. Kaisashi bristled at the insult. She didn't mean it, he knew, but if she was acting this way it could only mean they weren't alone. He stretched his senses and found nothing. That didn't give him the reassurance it should have. Come now, my dear, How many times have you told me my scatterbrain was my greatest charm? He said. How many? Hey. She looked back at him with a grumpy scowl on her lips. I told you 5 times since morning your stupidity was a danger to our Sakura. 5. I'm worried about Sakura. He threw his arm around her, laughing as though amused. He patted his daughter's head while his wife used the cover to retrieve a scroll from a seal Sakura had placed in her. Our Sakura will grow to be strong and beautiful. She already has herself a boyfriend at such a young age. He laughed loudly. She'll be fine, we should head to the Uchiha compound. Mabuki sighed genuinely as her husband covered her movement with his loud voice and body. She dropped small marble-sized balls to the ground. Some stayed where they landed, others rolled down the steps, and that was fine. Sometimes your stupidity can be suffocating. She elbowed him, and as usual he over-exaggerated for a more dramatic effect. They are closing in, hurry. He scooped her up in his arms, Sakura secured in hers. Let's head home and put Sakura to bed so we can continue what we started this evening. There was no hidden meaning there, and Mabuki blushed despite herself. Her husband sure had his priorities straight. With one big leap, they were in the air. As they predicted, those following them rushed to where they once stood. Kai. She activated the marbles and smoke of all colors exploded. They were only smoke bombs Sakura had made as a child as an experiment. She had kept all her prototypes as a keepsake. To think she would have to use them here. What the? He faked surprise. Did we drop something? Did that do it? Idiot. It's because you're so reckless. Of course not, idiot. Look sharp. They landed and quickly made their way toward the Uchiha clan. If they were fast, they might catch up with Itaki. Wood burst from the ground in front of them, coiling toward them like snakes. The Haranos leaped out of reach, surprise and confusion on their faces. Before they could gather themselves, a barrage of kunao flew toward them. Dear! She screamed, and her husband twisted his body until he was in front of her. Metals knock against wood, surprising the attackers. The man had warded off their attack with his geta sandals. The couple successfully landed without a scratch, and their child somehow still sleeping. The husband stood protectively in front of his wife, facing the direction of the last attack. The wife, however, was looking to the left, her eyes narrow and body tense. A sensor type, had to be. Losing their element of surprise, though they didn't have it to begin with, they stepped out of the shadow. 5 Anbu members stood before them, armed to a T and ready for war. The woman gasped horrified, and the man glared at them. They now knew what they were facing and realized they didn't stand a chance. To fight shinobis on your level was one thing, but a fight against the elite didn't stand a chance. Even knowing this, they stood their ground, or were they too terrified to move? What is the meaning of this? The man gritted out, shaking in fear. By order of the 3rd Hokage, Anbu with sliver hair behind a wolf mask said. We are here for the traitor posing as Sakura Harano. He declared. The couple turned pale as death. The man didn't dare look away from them, but the woman looked down at the child in her arms. As though sensing her distress, the child nuzzled her face into her bosom. Wolf took one step forward, getting their attention. The Hokage is a merciful man. He has agreed to spare your life on the account you hand over the child immediately. They weren't stupid, they had to have realized the child was not their own. A wise and loyal shinobi would follow the rules and give up the traitor. He wasn't sure why, but the image of his father on the ground bleeding out from a self-inflicted wound flashed in his mind. This wasn't the same. Not even close. Itaka sighed upon reaching his clan. Naruto and Sasuke had been dozing off since they left, muttering that they would become stronger in their sleep. Itaka wasn't sure what Sakura had done to his brother, but he had to have faith that it wasn't something bad. So caught up with his brother, he didn't sense them until it was too late. Adamantine chains sprung from the ground and wrapped around him, holding him in place. He cursed having been caught off guard and attempted to break free. Don't bother, these chains are strong enough to hold a tailed beast. A silky voice from a distance cooed. Okubo clicked on the ground as they approached. Crimson hair danced in the cold night air, a pink Sakura-themed kimono, silky and glamorous trailing behind her. Her emerald eyes were framed by long lashes and pierced his soul. It wasn't her beauty that stole his breath, not her cold smile or the chains coming from her back. No, it was none of those, for they all had a reasonable and acceptable explanation. It was the blood that had him pausing. Her beautiful pink roll was stained almost completely in blood, and her smooth face also had stains of blood upon it. For a woman who no doubt could entice a man with a single look. At that moment she looked like a demon coming to steal his soul. "Now be a good boy and give me the young Uzumaki."